She walked out of her first marriage with $26 and a broken name. She walked into her second with 3 grieving children, an iron gate, and a husband who ran Chicago's most feared criminal empire. Most women would have run. Evelyn Ward stayed, not because she had nowhere to go, but because for the first time in her life, someone needed her to. This is the story of a woman who lost everything, stepped into the most dangerous house in the city, and became the one thing a mafia boss could not buy, command, or protect himself from. If this story moves you, hit like and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. The rain came down the way bad news always does, without warning, without mercy, and in amounts you were never prepared for. Evelyn Ward stood on the courthouse steps with her handbag pulled against her chest and her eyes fixed on nothing in particular. The papers were signed. The marriage was over. 3 years of her life reduced to a manila folder and a clerk's rubber stamp. And Sebastian Crane had not even bothered to be in the room when it happened. He had sent his attorney instead. A man in a charcoal suit who smelled like expensive cologne and did not once look her in the eye. She had signed where they told her to sign. She had initialed where they told her to initial. And when it was done, the attorney had gathered the documents into a briefcase with the practiced efficiency of someone who had witnessed this particular kind of ending many times before, and he had left without shaking her hand. Evelyn counted the cash in her wallet, standing on the courthouse steps in the rain, because she needed something concrete to hold on to. $26. A crumpled 10, a 10, 5 ones, and a single. She pressed her thumb across the bills and thought about the last time she had worried about money. Before Sebastian, before the Crane name, before she had traded her own last name for his like it was nothing more than a worn coat she no longer needed. She had been foolish in ways she was not ready to fully name yet. The rain soaked through her coat. She did not move. Sebastian's text arrived at 4:47 in the afternoon. She knew this because she looked at her phone as the notification appeared, and the time was the only piece of information her brain chose to absorb cleanly. The message itself she had to read twice. If she wants to leave, let her leave clean. It had not been sent to her. It had been forwarded to her, by accident or by intention. She could not be certain. From the attorney to Sebastian, and then somehow routed back to her phone through the joint account they had not yet formally closed. Or perhaps Sebastian had sent it directly. With Sebastian, cruelty and carelessness occupied the same postal address. Let her leave clean, as though she were a wound, as though the marriage had been something that happened to him and she had merely been the instrument of the damage. Evelyn put her phone in her coat pocket and walked down the courthouse steps into the rain. She had nowhere to go. This was the fact she had been avoiding since 3 weeks ago when Sebastian's mother had appeared at the apartment door with 2 men from building management and informed Evelyn, with the specific brand of gentleness that only truly vicious people can deploy, that the lease was in the Crane family's name and that arrangements for her relocation had already been made. The arrangements were a single night at a mid-rate hotel near the river and a contact number for a real estate agent who specialized in short-term furnished rentals. She had used the hotel for 3 nights, paying from the emergency account she had kept hidden. $800 she had saved in increments small enough that Sebastian would not notice. That money was gone now. The real estate agent had stopped returning her calls 2 days ago when it became apparent she could not afford anything on the listings she had been sent. Her phone was nearly dead. She walked. The Gold Coast neighborhood was 4 miles from the courthouse, and she walked all 4 of them in the rain with her coat soaked through and her shoes collecting water with every step. She was not walking toward anything specific. She was walking because stopping meant having to think clearly about what came next, and she was not ready for that particular confrontation with herself. It was near the end of the 2nd mile that her phone buzzed once in her pocket, the specific short buzz that meant a new email, not a call. And she pulled it out from habit more than intention. The email had come through a professional network she had largely forgotten she belonged to. A classmate from her undergraduate years, a woman named Portia Haynes, who had worked in private household placement services, had sent out a blind distribution to former contacts. The subject line was minimal, urgent placement, live-in position, immediate start. Evelyn read it standing under the awning of a dry cleaner that had closed for the evening. The posting described a live-in position in a private residence on the Gold Coast. A maternal presence was required. Not a nanny, the posting specified, but someone capable of providing emotional stability and daily household presence for 3 children between the ages of 6 and 9. Housing provided, meals provided, salary upon interview. The word that caught her eye, buried in the 4th line between comprehensive benefits and professional references required, was a word she had not seen in a long time. Protection. Not security. Not a safe environment. Protection. She stared at that word for a long moment in the rain under the dry cleaner's awning with her dead phone in her hand and $26 in her wallet. Then she replied to the email before the phone died completely, gave the address she was standing at as a meeting point, and waited. Portia called from a number she did not recognize within 12 minutes. The conversation was short and strange. Portia's voice had a careful quality to it. Not nervous exactly, but measured, the way people speak when they are choosing words around things they are not permitted to say directly. The family is prominent, Portia said, very private, very serious about discretion. How serious? Evelyn said. I need you to understand that this is not a typical placement. The household has specific operational expectations. There are rooms you won't enter. There are conversations you will not repeat. The children are the priority, absolute priority, but the environment is not conventional. Evelyn looked at the rain falling on the empty street. Does the position start tonight? She said. A pause. If you pass the preliminary meeting, give me the address. The address was 6 blocks away. She walked it in 11 minutes with her dead phone in her pocket and her wet coat sticking to her shoulders. The black iron gates were the first thing she saw. Tall and close-fitted, with no ornamental curling, no decorative flourish, just iron bars set in stone columns that gave no information about what was on the other side. A camera above the gate intercom watched her without apology. She pressed the call button. A voice came through almost immediately, male and uninflected. Name. Evelyn Ward. I have an appointment through Portia Haynes. 3 seconds of silence. Then the gate clicked and swung inward. The house at the end of the drive was large in the way that old Chicago money tended to be large. Not ostentatious, not performing wealth for the benefit of observers, but simply occupying more space than most structures because it had been built in an era when space was the point. Stone facade, tall windows, a front entrance with no ornamentation but a lamp above the door that cast a specific kind of warm yellow light into the wet evening. A woman in dark clothing opened the door before Evelyn reached the top step. She had the efficient bearing of someone accustomed to managing logistics quickly. Mrs. Ward? Ms. Ward, Evelyn said. As of this afternoon. The woman's expression did not change. Please come in. Mr. Belandi will see you shortly. You can wait in the front sitting room. Evelyn stepped inside. The interior was quiet in a way that large houses sometimes are when they are full of things that are not being said. Polished floors, walls with paintings that appeared to be old and were probably significant, a staircase that curved upward to the left. No clutter, no mess, but also no warmth. No children's shoes left near the door, no crayon drawings taped to anything. No evidence that 3 children between 6 and 9 years old lived in this house. She was standing near the window in the sitting room, looking at the rain-wet garden visible through the glass, when she heard footsteps behind her and turned. The man who entered the room was not what she had been picturing. She had been picturing someone older, or at least someone who wore wealth the way she was accustomed to seeing it worn, polished, contained, presenting a specific version of themselves for assessment. Dante Belandi wore a dark suit without a tie, with the sleeves pushed to the forearm, and he moved through the doorway with the specific economy of someone who did not waste motion. Late 30s, dark hair, a face that had been handsome once and had since become something more severe, the way faces do when they have been required to maintain a particular expression for too many consecutive years. He looked at her the way people look at things they are deciding whether to trust. You're wet, he said. It's raining, she said. He studied her face. You walked. I didn't have a car. From the courthouse. She went still. I didn't mention the courthouse. No, he said. Portia did. He crossed to the chair near the fireplace but did not sit. Sebastian Crane's ex-wife, divorced this afternoon. Nowhere to stay. He said it without judgment, but also without softening it, just the facts assembled cleanly. I had you looked into before you walked through the gate. I do that with everyone. And you still let me in. I'm still deciding, he said. Evelyn held his gaze. Then let me make it simple for you. I have a degree in child development and 3 years working in a family education center before I made the mistake of marrying someone who convinced me I didn't need to work anymore. I have a genuine and specific skill set with children who are struggling emotionally. I'm not going to pretend I'm not desperate because you clearly already know that I am, but desperation doesn't make me incompetent. Something in his jaw shifted slightly. Not a smile, more like a decision being made. My children, he said, have been through something that I cannot fully explain to you tonight. I understand. I don't think you do yet. 3 of them. Triplets, 6 years old. They had a woman in this house for 4 months before you, a qualified professional with excellent references. She lasted 4 months. He paused. She left in the middle of the night. Evelyn waited. My daughter hasn't finished a full meal in 6 weeks, he said. She believes that every woman who enters this house eventually leaves. She is 6 years old and she has already decided this is a fact about the world. He said it without self-pity, but the weight of it sat in his voice like something he carried everywhere. My sons are their own separate problems. Tell me about them, she said. He looked at her. Which one? Both, all 3, whichever you think I need to understand first. For a moment he seemed uncertain, which she suspected was not an expression this man wore often. Then he sat in the chair by the fireplace, leaned forward with his forearms on his knees, and told her. Matteo was the oldest by 4 minutes and operated accordingly. He was precise, highly organized, and had developed in the months since their mother's absence a specific compulsive behavior around broken things. He collected objects that were damaged and brought them to his room with the stated intention of repairing them. He had repaired none of them. The room was full of broken toys, split picture frames, a clock with no hands, a music box that no longer played. He did not speak about his mother. He did not speak about much of anything. Nico was humor deployed as armor, Dante said. He was the kind of child who made adults laugh and used their laughter as a measuring instrument. If he could make you laugh, you were manageable. If you couldn't be made to laugh, you were a threat. He followed people around the house under the pretense of finding things to do, but what he was actually doing was monitoring whether anyone seemed about to leave. Livia was the one who had stopped eating. She has a system, Dante said. He said it flatly, but she heard the exhaustion underneath it. 3 bites. If she eats 3 bites, she marks a box on a piece of paper. She explained to me that she is keeping score. If someone earns enough marks, they can stay. He stopped. She came up with this herself. She is 6. Evelyn felt something tighten in her chest. She did not look away from him. Where is she now? She said. Upstairs. They're all upstairs. They know someone is being interviewed. They've been through this before. They watch from the landing? He looked at her sharply. Nico does. Yes. And Matteo? Matteo sits at the top of the stairs with something broken in his hands and pretends he's not listening. And Livia? Dante was quiet for a moment. Livia stays in her room and waits to find out if anyone is coming to say goodnight. Evelyn set her bag down on the floor beside her feet. She looked at the man across from her. This quiet, severe, heavily burdened man who ran what she was beginning to understand was something considerably more than a private business enterprise. And she made a decision. I'll take the position, she said. I haven't offered it yet. You're going to, she said, because you've been talking to me for 20 minutes and you haven't asked me to leave. And you wouldn't have told me about Livia's 3-bite system if you weren't considering me seriously. That's something you keep close. She held his gaze. I know what it looks like when someone is protecting information about a person they love. The silence stretched between them. The rules, he said finally. There are rooms in this house you will not enter without my explicit permission. There are conversations you will overhear that you will not repeat. Not to Portia, not to anyone outside this house. If you observe something you don't understand, you do not ask questions. You focus on the children. And if something puts the children at risk, you come to me directly. Not to the staff, not to anyone else. And if I need to leave, she said. Not tonight, but eventually. His eyes met hers. The contract we would sign allows you to leave with 30 days' notice. Your personal finances will remain entirely your own. You will have a private account that I do not have access to. He said it carefully, as though he had considered these particular words before. I am not interested in owning anyone's exit strategy. She thought about Sebastian's text. Let her leave clean. The same words, arranged differently. She thought about what it meant that Dante Belandi had apparently anticipated that she would need to be reassured she could leave, and had already structured the terms around it. When do I start? She said. Tonight, he said. If you're staying, there's a child upstairs who needs to know if someone is coming to say goodnight. Evelyn picked up her bag from the floor. She followed the housekeeper up the staircase and down a corridor that smelled of old wood and something faintly like pencil shavings. She passed 2 closed doors, and then the housekeeper stopped outside a third and stepped back without knocking. Evelyn knocked. No answer. She knocked again, softer. Livia? My name is Evelyn. I just started working for your dad tonight. I'm not going to make you come out or talk to me. I just wanted to say goodnight. Silence. Then, barely audible through the door, Are you going to leave? Evelyn pressed her palm flat against the door. Her coat was still damp. Her shoes were still wet. She had $26 and no plan beyond the next 12 hours. Not tonight, she said. Tonight I'm going to be down the hall. A pause that lasted long enough that she nearly turned to go. Then the small voice said, Okay. Evelyn stood there another moment with her hand on the door. Down the corridor, she heard the creak of a floorboard and turned just slightly to catch a shadow at the top of the staircase, retreating. Nico, she assumed, tucking himself back out of view with the practiced invisibility of a child who had spent too long watching to see who was about to disappear. And at the top of the stairs, sitting with his back against the wall and something broken in his hands, Matteo looked directly at her. Not hiding, just watching. His eyes were his father's eyes, measuring, unreadable, deciding. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked back down at the thing in his hands. It was a music box, she realized. The lid was open and the mechanism inside was exposed. Small metal teeth, a drum that should have turned, a pin that had snapped free of its housing. The box was not playing. It had probably not played in a long time. Evelyn said nothing. She went to her room, changed out of her wet clothes, and sat on the edge of the bed in the quiet house. Downstairs, somewhere in the room she did not yet have permission to enter, a man who controlled Chicago ran a criminal empire with cold precision and could not convince his daughter to eat dinner. And in a corridor of this same house, 3 6-year-old children had just decided, with the specific gravity that only grief-trained children possess, whether or not the woman who arrived in the rain tonight was worth the risk of trusting. Evelyn did not know yet what the answer was. What she did not know, what she would not know until 3 days later, when a black SUV pulled slowly past the iron gates and the man behind the wheel watched the house with a particular kind of focused, patient attention, was that someone else had already made a decision about her. And that decision had nothing to do with the children. The black SUV came back on the 3rd morning. Evelyn saw it from the kitchen window at 6:47 a.m. while she was standing at the counter waiting for the coffee to finish and watching the iron gate at the end of the drive, the way she had developed a habit of doing without quite realizing it. The SUV moved slowly, not the speed of someone passing by, not the speed of someone lost. The speed of someone measuring distance. She watched it until it disappeared around the corner. Then she poured her coffee and said nothing about it to anyone. The first 3 days had established a rhythm that was less a routine than a series of small negotiations. Livia had not come out of her room for meals. She accepted a tray left outside her door, and Evelyn had taken to sitting on the floor of the corridor with her back against the opposite wall, while Livia ate, not speaking, not pushing, just present in the way that you have to be present with an animal that has been hurt badly enough that presence itself is the first thing it needs to learn to tolerate again. On the 2nd day, Livia had opened the door 3 inches. On the 3rd day, she had opened it 6. Nico had decided within 36 hours that Evelyn was worth investigating. He did this by appearing near wherever she happened to be working, folding laundry, organizing the children's reading shelf, sitting at the kitchen table going through the household calendar that Dante's assistant had left for her, and finding small tasks to perform in her vicinity that required no acknowledgement. He reorganized a drawer that did not need reorganizing. He carried a stack of books from one end of a room to the other, and then, after a pause, carried them back. He was watching her with the focused attention of a child conducting a longitudinal study. She let him. She did not make it easy by being interesting, and she did not make it hard by being cold. She simply continued doing what she was doing and allowed him to form whatever conclusions he was forming. Matteo she had barely seen. He left his room in the morning, went to a specific chair near the window in the second-floor library, and sat with broken things in his hands and books he was not reading. On the third morning, she had left a small tube of craft adhesive on the library table without comment. By afternoon, it was gone. Dante she saw at breakfast and sometimes at dinner when he made it home before 8. He sat at the head of the table with the specific posture of someone managing the distance between themselves and the room carefully. He watched the children. He watched Evelyn with the children. He said little. On the fourth morning, Livia opened her door all the way. She was small, smaller than Evelyn had expected, though she did not know why she'd expected anything different. Dark hair, her father's eyes, a nightgown with a small tear at the cuff that someone had attempted to mend with the wrong color thread. She stood in the doorway and looked at Evelyn sitting on the floor of the corridor with her coffee and said, "You're still here." "I'm still here," Evelyn said. Livia looked at the floor. "You can come in if you want." The room was tidy in the way children's rooms are tidy when the child has learned that tidiness is a form of control. Everything in its place. Stuffed animals arranged by size on the shelf, a drawing pad on the desk, closed, and on the nightstand, a piece of paper with a hand-drawn grid, 3 columns, 7 rows, and marks in some of the boxes. 3 bytes. Scored like a ledger. Evelyn looked at it. Livia watched her look at it. "How does it work?" Evelyn said. 3 bytes counts as 1 mark, Livia said. "If I get to 20 marks, you can stay." "What happens if I leave before 20? Livia looked at the wall. Then I was right. Evelyn sat down on the edge of the bed. "Okay," she said, "let's figure out breakfast." She did not push for more than that. She sat with Livia in the kitchen while the little girl ate 4 bites of toast, 1 extra, unprompted, and marked her paper with the deliberate seriousness of someone conducting important business. Nico appeared in the kitchen doorway, registered what was happening, and disappeared without comment. 5 minutes later, he came back and sat at the counter and ate his own breakfast with the studied nonchalance of someone who absolutely had not just been quietly watching from the hallway. Evelyn looked at him. "Do you want juice?" "I already have water," he said. "I wasn't asking about water." A pause. "Yeah," he said. "Juice is fine." She poured it and slid it across the counter without ceremony. He drank it and did not say thank you, which she did not require, and that seemed to satisfy something in him because he stayed at the counter for the rest of the meal instead of hovering near the door. It was a small thing. In the architecture of what these 3 children had been through, it was a hairline crack in a wall, nothing more. But Evelyn had learned long ago that hairline cracks were where everything eventually started. She was thinking about this, standing at the kitchen sink rinsing cups while Livia and Nico argued with subdued intensity about something at the table behind her, when she heard the front door and then footsteps in the hall that were not the housekeeper's measured stride. Too fast. Too deliberate. Dante came into the kitchen at 8:23 in the morning, which she knew was not typical because she had his schedule on the calendar, and he was supposed to leave for a meeting on the north side at 8. He was still in his coat. He looked at the children at the table, and something moved through his face quickly. Relief, she thought, and then the rapid suppression of relief. And then he looked at Evelyn. "I need a minute," he said. He did not specify who with. She looked at the children, told them she'd be right back, and followed him into the hall. He had stopped near the front sitting room and turned to face her with his arms crossed in the specific way men cross their arms when they are containing something they have not yet decided whether to say. "There was a car outside this morning," she said. He looked at her. "You saw it. 3rd day running, different plates each time, same vehicle." Something in his jaw tightened. You should have told me the first morning. I wasn't sure it was relevant the first morning, she said. I'm telling you now. He studied her for a moment with an expression she was beginning to recognize. The one where he was deciding how much she needed to know versus how much knowing would change something he wasn't ready to change. It's handled, he said. Is it a threat to the children? I said it's handled. That's not an answer to my question, she said. The silence between them had a specific texture. He was not accustomed to being pressed. She could see that clearly. Not in his personal space, not by someone who worked in his house, not by anyone who did not have either equal power or something he needed from them. She stood in it and did not step back. Not directly, he said finally. Not yet. Then tell me what to do if the gate gets opened when you're not here. It won't. Dante. She said his name plainly, without softening it, and he went slightly still. Tell me what to do. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, You take the children to the back of the house, the room off the kitchen. There's a door behind the pantry that opens to a passage. You go there, you stay until Marco or Leon tells you it's clear. You do not open any outside door. You do not call anyone except the number programmed into the house phone under the name Front. Okay, she said. That's it? Okay? What else do you want me to say? He uncrossed his arms. Something in his posture shifted, not toward her exactly, but away from the rigid containment he had been holding. Most people ask more questions, he said. Most people haven't been through a divorce where asking questions got them nowhere, she said. I'd rather know what to do in an emergency than understand the full context of who created it. He made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Then his phone buzzed in his pocket, and the moment was over. He answered it in Italian, brief and low, and walked toward the front door. She went back to the children. The week turned. Livia reached 12 marks on her paper. Matteo began appearing at meals, sitting at the far end of the table, eating without speaking. The tube of craft adhesive had been joined on the library table by a small set of precision screwdrivers that Evelyn had ordered from the household account. She had included it in the weekly supply list without explanation, and Dante's assistant had approved it without question. The screwdrivers were gone from the table by the next morning, and from somewhere above her she heard the faint rhythmic sound of something being carefully disassembled. She was building something. She did not have a name for it yet. It was on the 9th day that the first real confrontation happened. She was in the upstairs library returning books to shelves when she heard raised voices from one floor below. Adult voices. Dante's, low and controlled, and a second voice she did not recognize, higher pitched, with an accent she couldn't immediately place. She kept shelving books. The voices escalated briefly and then cut off, followed by the sound of a door. Footsteps on the stairs. Fast. A man appeared in the library doorway, 40-something, heavy-set, with the particular physical confidence of someone who spent time in rooms where their presence was an implicit statement. He looked at Evelyn with the specific assessment that she had learned, in the last 9 days, meant he was calculating what category she belonged to. You're the new one, he said. She set a book on the shelf. I work here, yes. Luca Ferretti, he said, though she had not asked. Dante and I go back 20 years. That's a long time, she said. He came into the library, which she had not invited, and looked around the room with the proprietary ease of someone who had been in it before and believed he had standing there. You're the ex-wife of Sebastian Crane, he said. She turned from the shelf. I am. That's an interesting background for this position. I have a degree in child development and 3 years of practical experience, she said. That's the relevant background. He smiled. It did not reach anything behind his eyes. Dante is careful about who he lets near his children. He should be, she said. They've been through a lot. They have, Luca said. He picked up a small framed photograph from the side table. The children at some unspecified outdoor event, younger, laughing at something outside the frame, and looked at it with an expression she could not entirely read. Their mother was also someone Dante trusted near his children. The room went quiet in a specific way. Evelyn held his gaze. Was she? She was, Luca said. He set the photograph down with a care that was almost exaggerated. And then one day she wasn't here anymore. He looked at Evelyn. I'm sure Dante will tell you the whole story eventually. He tells people what he wants them to know when it's useful for them to know it. A pause. Or when it's useful for him. He left. She heard him go down the stairs, and she stood in the library with the shelved book still warm from her hand and her heart doing something unsteady in her chest. She did not see Dante until dinner that evening. The children were at the table. Livia had eaten 6 bites and marked her paper twice with an expression of deep satisfaction, and Nico had produced from somewhere a terrible knock-knock joke that had made Livia snort apple juice, which was the first time Evelyn had heard either of them laugh. Matteo had watched this exchange from the end of the table with the look of someone who was studying a phenomenon and choosing not to name it yet. After the children went upstairs, she found Dante in the kitchen. "Luca Ferretti was here today," she said. "I know," he said. He was standing at the counter with a glass of water, looking at nothing in particular. "He came into the library while I was working." "I know that too." "He said something about the children's mother," she said. Dante set the glass down with a quiet precision that was its own kind of emphasis. He turned to look at her. "What did he say?" "That she was someone you trusted, and then one day she wasn't here." Evelyn watched his face. "I don't need you to explain your life to me, but if there's something about this household that affects my ability to keep those children safe, I need to know what it is." He was quiet for a long moment. "Their mother's name was Sophia," he said. "She died 14 months ago." Evelyn went still. "I'm sorry. The circumstances of her death are not something I'm going to discuss with you tonight." He said it flatly, and she heard in it not cruelty but the controlled pressure of someone holding something enormous at a specific distance. "What you need to know is that Luca Ferretti has been part of this family's business for 20 years, and he has certain opinions about my domestic arrangements that I did not ask for and do not require." "Is he dangerous?" she said. Dante's eyes moved to her face. "To you?" "To the children." He was quiet for a beat too long. "Dante." "Not directly," he said. "The same answer as before." "The same answer isn't good enough anymore," she said. "Livia got to 12 marks today. She's starting to trust that I'm not going to disappear." Nico laughed at dinner for the first time since I got here. "Matteo is taking apart and reassembling a clock in the library, and I don't know if he's fixed it yet, but he came downstairs 3 times today, and each time he stayed a little longer. I am building something with your children, and I need to know what I'm building it inside of." He looked at her. The kitchen was quiet around them, the kind of quiet that exists in houses late at night when the people in them have been carrying weight all day. "Luca believes," Dante said carefully, "that the person responsible for what happened to Sophia is someone connected to this house." Evelyn let that land. "And you?" she said. "What do you believe?" "I believe he's right," Dante said. "I don't know yet who." The silence stretched between them like something pulled taut. "Is that why you hired someone from outside your usual network?" she said. "Someone Portia found. Someone with no connection to any of this." He did not answer, which was its own answer. "You're using me as a variable," she said. "Someone no one here has reason to surveil. Someone who moves through the house freely because the children need her to. That is not—" He stopped, his jaw tightened. "That was not the primary intention. But it's a function I serve." "Evelyn." "I'm not angry," she said, which surprised her as she said it because it was true. "I'm telling you that if you need someone who moves through this house freely, I need to know what I might be walking into." He looked at her for a long time with the specific expression of someone recalculating something they had been certain about. "There's a meeting tomorrow night," he said. "I need you to keep the children upstairs. Dinner at 6, in bed by 8. If anyone other than a Marco or Leon approaches you after 7, you take the children to the back passage, and you do not come out until I come for you personally." "Okay," she said. He looked at her like he was going to say something else. Then he picked up his glass and walked out of the kitchen. She stood at the counter and breathed. The meeting the following evening filled the lower rooms of the house with men she did not recognize. She heard them arriving in pairs, heard the low, continuous sound of voices below through the floorboards, saw the narrow strip of light under the drawing room door when she passed it carrying Livia to bed. She kept the children upstairs as instructed. She read to them. Livia insisted on the same story she had asked for the previous 3 nights, and Nico pretended he was not listening from the doorway. And Matteo sat at the far end of Livia's bed with his knees pulled up and his eyes tracking the page as Evelyn read. And for a moment, that particular moment, the four of them were just people in a room together, and nothing outside the room existed. She was in the corridor afterward, lights out, children in rooms, her hand pressed flat against the wall for no reason she could explain. When she heard the front door open and a voice she recognized, clear, even from the floor above, the enunciation of someone who had spent money on their diction. Sebastian Crane. She stood in the dark corridor and listened to her ex-husband's voice move through Dante Belandi's front hall below, and something in her chest turned over slowly like a stone in cold water. She did not go downstairs. She went to her room, sat on her bed, and stared at the wall. Sebastian Crane was standing in Dante Belandi's house. In the morning, she told Dante what she had heard. He was at his desk in the study, one of the rooms she had not been given permission to enter, and she knocked before entering, and he did not tell her to come in, but he also did not tell her to leave. He was reading something. He set it face down when she walked in. Sebastian Crane, she said. Last night. Dante looked at her. He wasn't at that meeting by accident, she said. Sebastian doesn't go anywhere by accident. He calculates every room he walks into. He has business interests, Dante said. There is an overlap with certain investments. What kind of overlap? Dante said nothing. He came to my divorce hearing with a corporate attorney, she said. Not a family attorney, a corporate attorney. I thought at the time it was a power move. Now I'm wondering if it was something else. She crossed her arms. What is Sebastian Crane connected to in this city that connects him to you? Dante leaned back in his chair. He looked at her with the expression she now recognized as the one preceding a decision, the specific stillness before something shifted. Crane Medical, he said, has been laundering money through a network of charitable foundations for approximately 4 years. 3 of those foundations are entities my family has historically been connected to. The room seemed to reduce itself to a smaller size. He used your foundations, she said. Without my knowledge, Dante said. Or so he claims. And you're investigating him. Someone is investigating him, Dante said. And he is aware of it. And now he is making visits he believes will communicate that he has leverage. Through me, she said. He thinks I'm leverage. He thinks many things, Dante said, most of them incorrect. She stood in the middle of the study with her arms crossed and her heartbeat somewhere in her throat. Sebastian had been in this house last night. Sebastian, who had sent one text message and not shown up to his own divorce proceedings, who had stripped her of an apartment and a life with the efficiency of someone clearing a desk, was in Dante Belandi's house because she was in Dante Belandi's house. She was the thread being pulled. He's going to come back, she said. Yes, Dante said. And when he does? Dante looked at her steadily. That depends on what you want. What I want, she said, is for whatever he's planning to not reach those children. Then we have the same interest, Dante said. He picked up his pen. She understood she was being dismissed. She turned to go. Evelyn? She stopped. The contract I offered when you arrived, he said. The terms of your employment. A pause. I'd like to revise them. She turned back. He was looking at her with the careful steadiness of someone who had made a decision and was waiting to see whether it would cost them something. I'd like you to consider a different arrangement, he said. Not employment. Something with more formal standing. He held her gaze. A legal marriage contract, no romantic obligation, a strategic structure. It would give you legal standing in this household and legal standing with the children, which would make you substantially more difficult for Sebastian Crane, or anyone else, to use as a point of pressure. The room was very quiet. You want to marry me, she said. I want to offer you a contract, he said. What you do with it is your choice. She looked at him across the desk in the study she was not supposed to be in and thought about the last contract she had signed, which had taken her apartment and her savings and her name and given her $26 and a rainy afternoon on courthouse steps. I need to think, she said. I know, he said. Take the time you need. She left the study and walked to the kitchen and stood at the window looking at the iron gate at the end of the drive. And she was standing there when the gate camera feed on the small monitor mounted to the kitchen wall flickered, a glitch, a signal interruption, and then came back showing the street empty. But for 3 seconds, before the feed returned, she had seen what the camera had caught. The black SUV, parked directly across from the gate, and in the front passenger window, visible for just a moment before the feed cut, Sebastian Crane's face looking directly at the house. She did not sleep that night. She lay in the dark of her room with the ceiling above her and the house quiet around her and Sebastian Crane's face on the camera monitor playing behind her eyes on a loop she could not interrupt. 3 seconds of feed before it cut. 3 seconds was enough. He had not looked at the house the way a man looks at a building he is passing. He had looked at it the way a man looks at something he intends to take apart. She knew that look. She had lived inside it for 3 years. At 2 a.m., she got up, put on her clothes, and went to the kitchen. She made tea, she did not drink, and stood at the window until the street outside the gate was gray with early morning, and the birds started up in the garden, and the house began to make its first small sounds of waking. Dante found her there at 6. He looked at her face and did not ask if she had slept. I need to know everything, she said. Not the version you give people to manage them. Everything. He crossed to the coffee maker, his movements unhurried, and she watched his back while he measured the grounds and thought about how much of a person you could learn from the way they did small domestic things. He was precise, economical, no wasted motion, no hesitation. The movements of someone who had learned a long time ago that uncertainty was a liability. He set 2 cups on the counter and turned to face her. What specifically? He said. Sophia, she said, how she died. What Luca believes and what you believe, and whether those 2 things are the same. And Sebastian, what he is actually to you, not the version where he's an investment overlap, the real version. Dante looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his cup and said, Come with me. He took her to a room she had not been in, a narrow study at the back of the house, different from the formal one at the front, with no window dressing and a single overhead light and a work table covered in documents that had the specific organized disorder of something actively being worked through. He closed the door behind them. Sophia was killed in a car accident, he said. That is what the official record states. And unofficially, the brake line on her car was cut. He said it without inflection. The way you say a thing you have already said to yourself so many times, it has become stripped of its surface feeling and left only the weight underneath. She was driving alone. She went into the river on the 290 overpass. The car was recovered 6 hours later. Evelyn set her cup down. The children, she said. They were with her? They were supposed to be, he said. Matteo had a fever that morning. She left them with the housekeeper. He paused. If he hadn't had that fever, all 4 of them would have been in that car. The room was very quiet. Who knew she was driving that route? Evelyn said. That is the question I have been working on for 14 months, he said. He moved to the work table and turned over a document so she could see it, a timeline, handwritten, with names in the margins. The route was not one she used regularly. She changed it that morning. 3 people knew the change, her driver, who did not drive her that day because she chose to drive herself, which was also unusual. My assistant at the time. And Luca. Evelyn looked at the timeline. Luca told you he knew. Luca told me he had spoken to her that morning and she had mentioned she was taking the expressway instead of the surface roads. He told me this voluntarily, the week after she died. As information. His voice was controlled, flat. He framed it as grief. As a man sharing the last conversation he had with someone we both cared about. But 3 months later, I found a phone, prepaid, purchased in cash, in a storage locker that Luca controlled jointly with another man. He stopped. The last call on that phone was made the morning Sophia died, 40 minutes before the accident. The recipient of that call was a number traced to a man who has since left the country and whose name appears in 3 separate financial investigations connected to Crane Medical. The ground shifted under everything. Evelyn said, Sebastian. The connection is indirect, Dante said. layered through two intermediaries and a shell entity registered in Delaware. But yes, the thread, when you follow it, leads to Crane Medical and to the man who ran its external investment portfolio at the time. He looked at her. Your ex-husband. She stood very still. Her hands were flat on the work table. She could feel the edge of the paper under her fingertips. Why? She said. What did Sophia have to do with any of this? Sophia, Dante said carefully, had discovered something. She had been going through financial records, personal ones, related to a property transfer I had asked her to look into, and she had found documentation of the foundation transfers, the laundering. She told me she had found something, but she had not yet told me what it was. He stopped. She died before she could. Evelyn looked at the timeline on the table and felt the entire shape of the last 9 days rearrange itself in her mind. The posting that had brought her here. The job description that had included the word protection. The fact that she had arrived through a network Luca would have no reason to surveil. The fact that Dante had accepted her almost immediately, despite, or because of, her connection to Sebastian Crane. You knew who I was before Portia called, she said. He met her eyes. You knew Sebastian's ex-wife had appeared in your network, and you let me come through the gate. I told you the truth when I said I had you looked into before you arrived, he said. What I did not tell you is that your name had appeared in a report I received 2 weeks before Portia's distribution email, a report on Sebastian Crane's domestic arrangements and legal exposure. Your divorce was in that report. The timing of it. He paused. I was not looking for you, but when you appeared, I recognized the circumstance. You brought me into this house, she said slowly, knowing Sebastian would eventually find out I was here. Yes. And knowing that when he found out, it would make him move. It was a calculation, he said. A reasonable one. I need Sebastian to move. I need him to overextend himself. As long as he believes he has leverage through you, he will make mistakes. She turned away from the table. She walked to the far wall of the small room and stood facing it and breathed with the specific controlled deliberateness of someone managing the difference between what they want to say and what they are going to say. She had left one man who used her. She had walked directly into the orbit of another. She turned back around. The children, she said. Did you know that bringing me here would put them at additional risk? The risk to the children exists regardless of who is in this house, he said. As long as the man responsible for Sophia's death is unidentified and free, they are at risk. The goal is to identify him and remove that risk, permanently. And I'm the instrument. You were the opportunity, he said. I did not place you in danger I had not already mitigated. You don't get to decide that, she said. You don't get to calculate my acceptable risk exposure without telling me the calculation. His jaw tightened. If I had told you this on the first night, I would have made a choice with full information, she said. Instead of a choice with the information you decided was useful for me to have. That's the same thing Sebastian did for 3 years, and I'm done being managed by men who think they know better than I do what I can handle. The silence in the small room was loud. Dante set his cup down. He looked at her with an expression she had not seen on him before. Not the controlled assessment, not the careful management. Something rawer, something that sat closer to the surface than he was accustomed to allowing. You're right, he said. She had not expected that. I made a calculation, he said. I justified it because the outcome matters. It matters more than almost anything I have worked toward in the last 14 months. But the way I used your position here without your knowledge was wrong. I know that. She looked at him. I'm not asking you to stay, he said. The contract offer stands as I described it. If you want to leave, the terms I promised you on the first night still hold. And the children, she said. He did not answer immediately. That was its own answer. She turned back to the work table. She looked at the timeline, the names in the margins, the thread of documentation that ran from a prepaid phone in a storage locker to a Delaware shell entity to a man who had sent her one text message on the afternoon she signed her divorce papers. Let her leave clean. He had known, she now understood, that she would come looking for work. He had possibly known about Portia's network. He had possibly, the thought arrived cold and specific, engineered her arrival in this house. Sebastian knew I would end up here, she said. Dante looked at her sharply. What? The divorce, she said. The timing. He stripped me of everything in a single week. The apartment, the access to accounts. He made it so I had nowhere to go and no resources to get there. And then he waited to see where I would land. She picked up the edge of the timeline. He knows I went to school with Portia. He knows Portia does private placement. Sebastian Crane does not leave things to chance. And I was living in his house for 3 years, and he knows every contact I have. She looked up. He sent me here, Dante? Not intentionally, maybe. But he created the conditions that guaranteed this is where I would end up. Dante went very still. He wanted you inside this house, he said. He wanted eyes inside this house, she said. He thought I would be desperate enough and naive enough to report back to him, or at minimum to be visible enough that he could use my presence here as a reason to make contact. She set the document down. Last night wasn't him checking on leverage. He was checking on his asset. The look on Dante's face in that moment was not something she could categorize neatly. It moved through several things too fast. Fury, recalculation, something that in another context might have been shame. If Sebastian placed you here intentionally, he said, then Luca may have been notified. Does Luca know about Portia's network? Luca knows about everything that moves through this family's orbit, Dante said. He had picked up his phone. He was moving toward the door. Stay in the house. Stay with the children. Dante. But he was already in the hall. She stood in the small back study with the work table and the timeline and the names in the margins, and she breathed. She breathed until her hands were steady and her thoughts had organized themselves into a shape she could work with. Then she went upstairs to the children. Livia was awake, sitting up in bed with her score sheet on her knees, adding a mark with serious deliberation. She had been eating more. Not full meals yet, but more. 7 bites yesterday at dinner. She looked up when Evelyn appeared in the doorway. You look tired, Livia said. I didn't sleep great, Evelyn said. Nico doesn't sleep when he's scared either, Livia said. She said it matter-of-factly, without drama, the way children report observations about the world. He walks around the upstairs hall. I can hear him. Evelyn sat on the edge of the bed. Are you scared? Livia considered this with the solemnity of someone taking the question seriously. Sometimes, she said, less than before. She looked at her score sheet. 17 marks. 3 more, Evelyn said. I know, Livia said. She looked up. But I think I already decided. Evelyn looked at the little girl's face. The dark eyes, the careful expression, the specific gravity of a 6-year-old who had learned that the world was not reliably safe and had developed a system for measuring it and was now considering whether the system had given her enough data. Decided what? Evelyn said. That you're not going to leave, Livia said, even without the marks. The thing that happened in Evelyn's chest at that was not small. She was still sitting on Livia's bed when she heard the front door. Not a knock, the door itself, opened with a key or forced with the specific sudden impact of something not politely requested. And then voices below. Multiple. Not the low measured tones of Dante's household. Something louder and less controlled. She put her hand on Livia's knee. Stay here, she said. All 3 of you stay in your rooms. Do not come into the hall. Evelyn. I'll come back, she said. She looked at the little girl. I will come back. She went into the hall. Nico's door was already open a crack. He had heard it too. She pointed at him through the gap, pointed down to the floor, and mouthed, Stay. He nodded once, which was the most direct compliance she had gotten from him. She went to the top of the staircase. Luca Ferretti was in the front hall below. With him were 2 men she had not seen before. And standing slightly behind Luca, with his coat still on and his face carrying the expression of a man who had prepared for this moment, was Sebastian Crane. She stopped at the top of the stairs. Sebastian looked up and saw her. There she is, he said. Not loud, conversational, which was how Sebastian delivered everything designed to cut. She came down the stairs at a pace she controlled. Her legs felt strange, a low-grade tremor in her thighs that she locked against through the effort of moving deliberately. She reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped with 4 feet of marble floor between herself and the men, and she looked at Sebastian with the steadiness she had been practicing since she was 23 years old and realized that flinching was the thing he fed on. "You need to leave," she said. "I own partial interest in 3 foundations that are tied to this property's financial history," Sebastian said pleasantly. "I have standing to be here." "You don't have standing in this house," she said. Luca spoke then, to the room rather than to her specifically. "Dante is unavailable," he said. "We'll wait." "Dante's schedule is not something I share with visitors," she said. "You're not staff anymore, though, are you?" Luca looked at her with a thin attention. "The contract proposal changes your standing. Interesting timing on that, given everything." Sebastian's expression shifted fractionally. Something came into his eyes that had not been there a moment before, sharper, colder. "What contract?" he said. She said nothing. "Evelyn." Sebastian's voice dropped. He took a step toward her. "What contract?" "Back up," she said. "You're going to marry him." It was not a question and it was not disbelief. It was the specific tone of a man recalculating, and recalculating fast. "You came here to take a domestic position, and now you're going to marry Dante Belandi." "What I do is not your business," she said. "It becomes my business," Sebastian said, "when the woman I was married to for 3 years is about to formalize a legal alliance with a man who is currently obstructing a federal inquiry into financial mismanagement." He closed the remaining distance between them, and she held her ground, which cost her something she would not show him. "Did he tell you about the inquiry? Did he explain that the same foundations connected to his family are under active investigation?" "I know about the foundations," she said. Something moved across Sebastian's face. "He told you." "I know more than you think I know," she said. The air in the hall changed. Luca had gone very still. His stillness was different from Dante's stillness. It was not the stillness of control, but the stillness of a man listening to something go wrong and calculating the response time. "The foundations," Luca said quietly. "What exactly did Dante tell you about the foundations?" She looked at him, and in that moment she understood, with the specific and absolute clarity that arrives sometimes in crisis, when every distraction burns away and leaves only the true shape of things, that she was not looking at 2 separate problems. Sebastian and Luca were not parallel threats that had arrived at the same door by coincidence. They were the same problem. Luca's 2 men had moved. Subtly, without dramatics, but she was standing in a hall she now could not exit without going through or past someone, and she was aware of this with the physical specificity of a person whose body had made the calculation before her mind fully caught up. "Where are the children?" Luca said. "Upstairs," she said. "Asleep." "At 9 in the morning," he said. She said nothing. "Step aside," he said. Not to her. To one of the men beside him. The man moved toward the staircase. "Stop," Evelyn said. The man did not stop. She put herself between him and the bottom of the stairs. It was not a decision she made consciously. Her body simply moved, and then she was standing there with her back to the staircase and the man in front of her with his hand already reaching to move her physically aside, and she looked at him with an absolute steadiness that she did not entirely feel, but had learned to perform with enough precision that it was by now indistinguishable from the real thing. "You do not go up those stairs," she said. The man looked at Luca. Luca looked at Evelyn. Sebastian had gone quiet. He was watching her with an expression she had never seen on his face in 3 years of marriage, something close to uncertainty, which was perhaps the most frightening thing she had witnessed in this hall so far. "Evelyn," Luca said. His voice had changed, softened in the specific way that things soften when they become genuinely dangerous. "This doesn't have to be complicated." "Then leave," she said. "There are documents in this house," he said. "Documents that Dante has been compiling. I need those documents before Dante uses them to build a case that is based on a misunderstanding of events that I am quite capable of explaining under the right circumstances. This has nothing to do with the children. Nothing you do in this house has nothing to do with the children," she said. "They live here." "Step aside," Luca said. She did not move. The man in front of her took her arm. What happened in the next 4 seconds was not planned and not elegant. She pulled her arm back, and the man's grip tightened, and she turned her body sharply to break the angle of the hold, a technique she had learned in a self-defense class she had taken 3 years ago after a particular incident in the Crane household that she had never told anyone about. And the grip broke, and she was still between him and the stairs, but barely, and her shoulder was screaming, and her breath was coming too fast, and she had run completely out of ways to do this without someone getting hurt. The front door opened. Dante came in with Marco directly behind him and one other man she had not seen before, but whose presence in the doorway communicated itself immediately and physically to everyone in the hall. The temperature of the room dropped. Dante took in the scene in the time it takes to blink. His eyes went to Evelyn first, to her arm, her posture, the specific rigidity of someone who has just used their body as a barrier, and then to the man who had touched her, and then to Luca, and then to Sebastian Crane standing slightly to the side with his hands in his coat pockets, and his expression trying very hard to be neutral. Dante walked into the hall. He walked past her, close enough that she felt him pass, and he stopped 4 feet from Luca and he said, very quietly, "Get out of my house." Luca opened his mouth. "Don't," Dante said. The word landed like something solid. Luca looked at Dante for a long moment. Then he looked at the men beside him. Then he looked at Evelyn. "This isn't finished," he said. "It is for today," Dante said. Luca left. His men went with him. At the door he paused without turning and said, "The documents won't save the children, Dante. You should know that by now." And then he was gone, and the door closed. Sebastian was still in the hall. Dante turned to look at him. "You should go as well," Dante said. Sebastian looked at Evelyn. His face had the expression she now understood had always been there underneath the composed surface. Calculation wrapped around fear, wearing the costume of confidence. "You don't know what you've walked into," he said to her. "I know exactly what I've walked into," she said. "I know about the foundations and the laundering and the Delaware entity and the phone call made 40 minutes before Sofia Belandi drove onto the 290 overpass." She watched the blood leave his face. "I know about all of it, Sebastian. I've known since this morning." Sebastian stood very still. "Leave," she said. He left. The hall was empty. Marco stood near the door. The unnamed third man had positioned himself near the corridor to the back of the house. Dante turned to Evelyn, and his face, for the first time since she had known him, was not fully controlled. Something had broken the surface. She could not name it precisely, but she felt the weight of it. "The children," he said. "Upstairs," she said. "They're fine. I told them to stay in their rooms." He exhaled slowly. One hand went to his face briefly. A gesture she had not seen from him, too unguarded for the man she had been watching for 9 days, and then dropped. "The documents Luca was looking for," she said. "The timeline. The phone records." "Secured," he said. "Copies in 3 separate locations." "He's going to move faster now," she said. "He knows you're close." "Yes." She looked at him. Her shoulder still hurt. Her hands had stopped trembling somewhere in the last 3 minutes, but the effort of stopping them had exhausted something fundamental, and she was aware of a tiredness that sat not in her muscles, but further in the part of a person that determines whether they keep going. "The contract," she said. He looked at her. "I'll sign it," she said. "Not because I'm afraid and not because I need somewhere to live. I'll sign it because those children are upstairs right now, and Livia told me this morning that she had already decided I wasn't going to leave, and I am not going to prove her wrong because the situation got complicated." She held his gaze. "But I need you to understand that if I sign that contract, I am not an instrument. I am not a variable in your calculation. I am a partner in whatever this is. Equal information, equal standing. If something is going to affect those children or affect me, I know about it." Dante looked at her for a long time. "Agreed," he said. "And Sebastian," she said, "whatever you're planning for Sebastian, I don't want revenge. I want him to face what he did. Whatever he did to Sofia, whatever he's done to the foundations, whatever he arranged, I want it to come out in a way that can't be buried." "I understand," he said. "Do you?" "Yes," he said, and then quietly, with a weight behind it that she believed, Sofia deserved that too. She nodded. She went upstairs to the children. Livia was in the doorway of her room. Nico was behind her. Matteo stood at the top of the staircase with his arms crossed and the music box in his hands. She saw now that the lid was closed, and when she looked carefully, the small mechanism inside was no longer exposed, the pin reseated in its housing. He had fixed it. He looked at her and then looked down at the box, and with the deliberateness of someone doing a thing they have been deciding to do for a long time, he held it out to her. She took it. She pressed the small lever on the side and the mechanism began to turn, and from inside the box came music, thin and slow and a little imperfect in its rhythm, the way things are when they have been broken and repaired by someone learning how to do it. But music. Matteo looked at the floor. His jaw was tight. "I fixed it," he said. "I know," she said. "You did a good job." He nodded once. Then he turned and went to his room and closed the door with a care that was its own kind of statement. Evelyn stood at the top of the Belandi staircase with the music box playing its small, imperfect song in her hands, and Livia pressed against her side, and Nico pretending he was not doing the same thing on the other side. And below her, in the house that was either going to destroy everything or become the place where something finally held, a man who had used her was being dismantled piece by piece, while a man she did not yet fully know or trust was signing her name into the structure of his most dangerous fight. And somewhere in the city, Luca Ferretti was already on his phone, already moving, already doing the thing people do when they know they are about to be exposed and have only one option left. He was eliminating the evidence. And the most important piece of evidence in Dante Belandi's case was not the timeline on the work table or the phone records in the 3 separate secured locations. It was the woman standing at the top of the stairs with a music box in her hands and 2 children pressed against her sides. The music box stopped playing at midnight. Evelyn noticed because she had been lying awake listening to it. She had set it on the nightstand before bed, wound the mechanism the way Matteo had shown her without showing her, and let it run while she stared at the ceiling and tried to organize the shape of what was coming into something manageable. When it stopped, the silence it left was the specific kind that makes a person aware of every other sound in a house. The settling of old wood, the distant movement of wind against the windows, the footsteps in the corridor outside her door that did not belong to any of the children. She was upright before she was fully conscious of deciding to be. The footsteps stopped outside her door. She was off the bed and flat against the wall beside the door frame in the dark, her heart doing something enormous in her chest, when the knock came. 2 knocks, measured, then Marco's voice, low and even. "Mrs. Ward, Mr. Belandi needs you downstairs." She exhaled through her nose, counted 2 seconds, opened the door. Marco's face in the dim corridor light was professionally neutral in the way it always was, but his eyes were doing something different, moving, checking the corridor behind him before he looked at her. "What's happening?" she said. "Please come downstairs," he said. She pulled on clothes in the dark, jeans, a sweater, no time for anything else, and followed him. The house was lit in the lower rooms, which was wrong for midnight. Not all the lights, specific ones. The study, the hall, a lamp in the sitting room. The kind of lighting that meant people were working rather than living. Dante was in the front study. He was on the phone when she entered, and he looked at her and held up one finger, 1 minute, and continued the call in Italian, rapid and low. A man she had not seen before sat at the work table with the laptop open, his fingers moving quickly. Another man stood near the window, watching the street. She stood inside the door and waited. Dante ended the call and looked at her. His jaw was set. He had been awake for a long time. She could see it in the specific quality of his stillness, which had stopped being controlled and become something closer to exhausted endurance. "Luca has moved," he said. "Moved how?" "He's filed an emergency petition with a family court judge, a petition for temporary emergency custody of the children, citing concerns about their welfare in my household." He stopped. "The judge has a history with Luca's attorney. The petition has a preliminary hearing at 9 tomorrow morning." The cold moved through her chest slowly. "On what grounds?" she said. "That I have exposed the children to a domestic environment that is unsafe, unstable, and recently disrupted by the introduction of an unknown individual with no established family connection." He looked at her. "You." She pressed the heel of her hand against the door frame. "He's using me," she said. He's using the timing of the contract proposal and the lack of a formal marriage record to argue that your presence in the household is legally ambiguous and potentially harmful. Dante's voice was controlled, but barely. If he gets emergency custody, he gets the children out of this house before I can finish building the case against him. Once they are in his custody, even temporarily, he has leverage I cannot counter through legal means. What does that mean? She said. What do you mean you can't counter it through legal means? His eyes met hers directly. It means that if Luca takes those children, I will get them back. But the method available to me outside of legal process is not one I can use without consequences I cannot control. It would cost me everything I've built. It would confirm every allegation that has ever been made against this family. He stopped. And it would terrify them. They have already lost too much. She understood. The children were the thing he would not weaponize, not even to save them. The contract, she said. If we sign the contract tonight, it takes time to file and register, the man at the laptop said without looking up. By 9 tomorrow, it won't be on record. There's another way to establish standing, she said. Dante looked at her. Not marriage, she said. An emergency guardianship declaration. If you file tonight as a supporting party to an existing domestic arrangement, she stopped. Do you have a family attorney, not a corporate attorney? A family attorney. Yes. Get them on the phone, she said. Right now. Something moved through Dante's expression. Not quite surprise, but its close cousin. He picked up his phone. The next 3 hours were the organized chaos of people solving problems in real time with imperfect tools. The attorney, a woman named Hirsch, who answered on the second ring at 12:30 a.m. and sounded fully awake, which told Evelyn something useful about the nature of her relationship with this household, worked through the options with rapid precision while Evelyn sat at the work table and listened and contributed what she knew from her 3 years in family education services, which was more than she had previously had occasion to use. There was a mechanism, narrow, requiring specific documentation, dependent on Evelyn's professional history being verifiable before morning, but it existed. She was on her own phone at 1 a.m. calling numbers she had not dialed in 3 years. Her former supervisor at the Family Education Center, who answered confused and then alert and then willing. The registrar of the Professional Certification Board accessed through an emergency line she had looked up while Hirsch was still talking. Portia, who had the files of the original placement documentation, and who, when Evelyn explained what was needed and why, said only, "I'll email everything I have in the next 10 minutes." At 2:47 a.m., the documentation was filed. At 3:15 a.m., Evelyn sat back in her chair at the work table and looked at the ceiling and breathed. Dante set a cup of coffee in front of her. She had not seen him leave the room to get it. She picked it up without speaking. "Hirsch says it's strong," he said. "Not certain, but strong." "Luca's attorney will challenge the timing," she said. "Yes." "And the hearing is at 9. "Yes." She drank the coffee. It was very hot, and she drank it too fast and did not care. "The evidence," she said. "The timeline, the phone records. Is it enough?" He sat down across from her at the work table for the first time all night. He looked tired in a way that went past the physical. A deep structural exhaustion, the kind that comes from 14 months of holding something enormous together with insufficient support. "It's enough to begin a formal investigation," he said. "Whether it's enough to convict Luca in a court is a different question. His attorney is good. The chain of evidence for the phone has 2 weak points." He turned the cup in his hands. "Sebastian is a separate matter. His connection is indirect enough that he can argue he was defrauded by the intermediaries. He will make that argument, and it will take time to disprove." "Unless Sebastian talks," she said. Dante looked at her. "He's afraid," she said. "I've known him for 4 years, and I have never seen him afraid until this morning in this hall. If he believes he's going to be prosecuted for what happened to Sophia, even if the connection is indirect, he will calculate whether cooperation gives him better odds than defense." She set her cup down. "Sebastian cooperates with people who have more power than him. It's the only move he knows." "You're saying we go to Sebastian before the hearing." "I'm saying I go to Sebastian," she said. "Tonight, before he has time to get his attorney in place and build walls." The room went quiet. "No," Dante said. "He won't talk to you," she said. He has nothing to gain from talking to you. With you he will use whatever you say and whatever you reveal about what we know, Dante said. He will record it if he can, use it if he can, and then he will call his attorney at 7 a.m. and spend the hearing dismantling every piece of it. Unless I give him something to be more afraid of than prosecution, she said. Dante looked at her steadily. Evelyn, not a threat, she said, a reality. The reality is that Luca is already moving to remove the children. If Sebastian understands that Luca's next move, once he has custody of the children, is to eliminate every remaining witness who can connect the phone call to Sophia's accident, then Sebastian understands that he is on that list. She held his gaze. Luca used Sebastian as a resource. He does not keep resources once they become liabilities. Sebastian is smart enough to know this. He just needs someone to say it to him clearly. Dante was silent for a long time. Marco goes with you, he said finally. Marco waits outside. Marco goes inside the building, he said in a tone that was not a negotiation. He stays out of the room, but he is in the building. She looked at him. Okay. Sebastian's apartment was on the 51st floor of a building on Lakeshore Drive that Evelyn had visited twice during their marriage for events she had not enjoyed. The lobby concierge recognized her. A small mercy, or possibly not. And after a phone call upstairs that lasted long enough that she began planning what she would do if Sebastian refused, the concierge nodded and waved her through. She rode the elevator with Marco standing slightly behind her, and neither of them spoke. At the 51st floor, Marco stopped in the corridor. She walked to the apartment door. Sebastian answered in a robe over dress clothes. He had not slept either, she could see it. And his face when he saw her went through three things in rapid succession: surprise, calculation, and then a careful neutrality that cost him visible effort to assemble. Evelyn, he said. Let me in, she said. He stepped back. The apartment was the version of luxury that people choose when they are performing a life for themselves rather than living one. Pale furniture, statement art, a view of the lake that was genuinely extraordinary and entirely wasted on the man who owned it. He had a glass of something on the kitchen counter. He did not offer her one. She sat down without being invited. He remained standing. Luca Ferretti filed for emergency custody of Dante's children tonight, she said. Hearing is at 9. Sebastian's expression moved slightly. I'm aware. Are you aware that the documentation Dante has compiled connects the call made from Luca's prepaid phone to a number in your investment portfolio network? She watched his face. Not your personal number, but close enough that a federal prosecutor looking for a thread will find it within the first week. Sebastian sat down. The careful neutrality had stopped working. The Delaware entity, she said. The foundations. The timeline from the morning Sophia died. It's all in a file that is currently sitting in 3 separate secured locations and will be in the hands of a federal contact at 7 a.m. if Dante does not make a call before then. She leaned forward slightly. But if Luca gets those children out of the Belandi house this morning, Dante will make that call before 7. He will send everything. That exposes me, Sebastian said. Yes, she said. It exposes you. Indirectly, with weak linkages that a good attorney can probably navigate. She paused. But here's the thing about federal prosecutors, Sebastian. When they find a weak linkage, they do not stop. They find the next linkage, and the next. And you have been doing what you do for 15 years, and there are many linkages. He was looking at his hands. Luca will also be looking for linkages, she said. Once he has finished using the custody hearing as cover, he will be looking for witnesses to eliminate. You are a witness. You may not know everything, but you know enough. Luca knows you know enough. The silence in the apartment had a specific quality. She could hear Sebastian breathing. What do you want? He said. A signed statement, she said. What you know about the foundations. What you know about the Delaware entity. What you were told about the routing of the money and by whom. She held his gaze. Not what you did, Sebastian. What you were told. There's a difference in how that reads legally, and you know it. He looked at her. And in exchange. In exchange, the federal referral goes through Dante's attorney instead of directly. You become a cooperating party rather than a named subject. She paused. And Luca doesn't get those children. Sebastian was quiet for a long time, long enough that she counted her own heartbeats, 7, 8, 12, and made herself sit still through all of them. He told me it was a restructuring, Sebastian said finally, the foundation routing. He told me it was a restructuring of charitable assets to improve the tax position. Who told you? Luca. Through an intermediary, a man named Pharaoh who managed the external portfolio. He stopped. I didn't ask questions I didn't want answered. But you knew, she said. I suspected, he said. There's a difference. Write it down, she said. Exactly what you just told me. Sign it. He looked at her for a long moment with the expression of a man watching a version of himself he had believed was permanent dissolving in real time. You're not the same person, he said. It was not an accusation. It was something closer to disbelief. No, she said. I'm not. He got up. He went to the desk near the window. He found paper and a pen with the specific mechanical movements of someone doing a thing before they can talk themselves out of it, and he wrote, and he signed, and he slid it across the desk without looking at her. She took it. She stood. The Crane family name will survive this, she said. It'll take work, but it's survivable. She picked up her bag. What happened to Sophia is not survivable for Luca. Make sure you understand the difference between your situation and his before you decide whether that statement is enough. She left. In the elevator going down, she stood with the signed statement in her hands and her reflection in the mirrored door, and she breathed. Her hands were steady. She did not know when that had happened. Marco looked at her when she came through the lobby. Done, she said. They were back at the Belandi house by 4:30 a.m. She put the statement on the work table in front of Dante, and he read it without speaking and then looked at her with an expression that was not the controlled assessment and was not the careful management and was not any of the versions of his face she had catalogued in the last days. How? He said. He was afraid, she said. I just showed him what the fear was actually pointing at. He looked at her for a moment longer than was necessary for the exchange of information. Then he picked up his phone and called Hirsch. The hearing at 9 a.m. lasted 47 minutes. Luca's attorney presented the emergency petition with the polished confidence of someone who had done this successfully before. The judge, a compact man with the specific tired patience of someone who had seen too many of these, read the filing and looked at the documentation attached. Hirsch presented the counterfiling, the professional standing documentation, the guardian declaration, and the statement from Sebastian Crane, which she had submitted that morning as supporting evidence of the nature and context of Luca Ferretti's emergency petition. The judge read Sebastian's statement twice. He set it down. He looked at Luca's attorney over his glasses with an expression that was not quite readable, but that Evelyn, sitting in the second row with her hands folded in her lap, interpreted correctly before the attorney did. This petition, the judge said, appears to have been filed by a party who is himself the subject of an ongoing inquiry connected to the welfare of the minor children named herein. He paused. I'm going to need more than 47 minutes. He set a continuation date for 3 weeks out and recessed. Luca's attorney came to his feet immediately, voice rising with practiced indignation, but the judge had already stood and the bailiff was already moving, and the attorney's indignation performed for no one. Dante, seated beside Hirsch at the respondent's table, did not turn around to look at Evelyn, but his hand, resting on the table beside Hirsch's files, went still for a moment in the specific way that hands go still when the body is absorbing something it has been holding its breath against. Then Luca was at the rail behind the barrier, and his face when he looked at Evelyn was not the carefully managed social aggression she had seen in the library or the calculated softness he had deployed in the hall. It was something stripped of performance, something cold and specific and very direct. You made a mistake, he said. She looked at him. Not today, he said. Today was competent, but you've put yourself in a position that has a specific kind of consequence, and you are not equipped to manage it. Tell me something I don't know, she said. He held her gaze for 3 seconds. Then he turned and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Marco moved immediately to Dante's side. The man who had been near the window in the study the previous night appeared from somewhere in the gallery and positioned himself between Evelyn and the door Luca had just used. Dante was on his feet, speaking to Hirsch in a low, rapid exchange. Evelyn sat in the second row. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number. She answered. Static. Then a sound she identified after 2 seconds. A music box. Thin, slow, a little imperfect in its rhythm. The exact sound of the box Matteo had fixed, playing through the phone speaker from somewhere she could not identify for 5 seconds, and then cutting to silence. Her blood went cold. She was on her feet. Dante? He turned from Hirsch. She held up the phone. She did not have to say anything. He looked at her face and took one step toward her, and then his own phone was in his hand and he was calling Marco, and the word he said into it was not a question. The house, he said. Right now. All three. Marco was already moving. They pushed through the courthouse doors into the gray morning light, with Dante's hand on her arm. Not gripping, not pulling, just contact, just the specific weight of a person making sure you are present and moving. And the car was at the bottom of the steps, and she was in it before she had consciously registered the decision to run. The drive from the courthouse to the Gold Coast took 11 minutes at that hour. She counted them. At the Iron Gate, the camera feed was live. The house looked still. Leon was visible on the front steps. She exhaled. Then Dante's phone rang. He answered, and she watched his face go through something she had not seen on it before. A fracture, brief and immediately contained, but real. He said 2 words in Italian she didn't understand and ended the call. What? She said. Nico, he said. He was at school. They were doing morning pickup, and he wasn't in his classroom. He looked at her. He was there at drop-off. He was in his seat at 8:15. At 8:47, he was gone. The car stopped at the gate. Evelyn's hand was on the door handle. Her heart was somewhere outside her body. Dante, she said. He looked at her. His face was the face of a man who had already lost one person from the people he was supposed to protect, and who was now standing at the edge of that same specific darkness again. And who was doing the thing people do when they have no margin left, not breaking, not yet, but bending to an angle that could not hold. We're going to find him, she said. He said nothing. Look at me, she said. He looked at her. We are going to find him, she said. Tell me what you need me to do. For a moment, one long, terrible moment, the controlled and calculated and carefully maintained Dante Belandi was simply a man sitting in the back of a car outside his own house, with his son missing and his daughter and the child who fixed broken things waiting inside, and nothing in his considerable arsenal sufficient to guarantee the outcome he could not live without. Then something in him settled, not resolution exactly, and not calm, something harder than both. Take Matteo and Livia to the back room, he said. The passage. You stay there until I come for you. He met her eyes. I am going to find my son. She held his gaze. Okay, she said. Go. He was out of the car before it fully stopped, and she was through the front door 30 seconds behind him, and she took the stairs 2 at a time with Leon behind her, and found Livia in the corridor outside her room with wide eyes and no sound coming out of her, which was somehow worse than crying, and Matteo standing beside his sister with his arm around her shoulders, with the specific rigid protectiveness of a child who has made himself the barrier between his sister and whatever is coming. Evelyn knelt in front of them. We're going to the back room, she said. Right now, both of you. We're going to go there, and we're going to wait, and your dad is going to bring Nico home. Livia's mouth opened. Where's Nico? Your dad is getting him, she said. Is he hurt? Matteo said. His voice was flat in the specific way voices go flat when the person using them is refusing to let anything through. I don't know yet, she said. I won't lie to you. I don't know. But I know your dad and I know what he will do to bring your brother home, okay? Matteo looked at her. Then he took his sister's hand and said, Come on, and moved toward the back staircase without waiting to be led. Evelyn followed them through the kitchen and through the pantry door and into the passage behind it, which was narrow and lit by a single overhead strip and smelled of old stone. Leon pulled the pantry door closed behind them. She sat on the floor of the passage with her back against the stone wall, and Livia climbed into her lap immediately, all 48 pounds of her, face pressed into Evelyn's shoulder. Matteo sat beside her with his knees pulled up and his hands clasped between them and his eyes fixed on the opposite wall. In the stone passage, in the dark and the quiet, With the music box upstairs playing a repaired song that no one was listening to, she held Dante Bellandi's daughter and waited for a man she had known for 9 days to bring back a boy she had come to know in the space of ordinary mornings and bad knock-knock jokes and glasses of juice pushed across a kitchen counter. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number again. She answered without speaking. A child's voice. Scared but controlled, which was somehow the most Nico thing she had ever heard. "Evelyn," he said. "I'm here," she said. Her voice came out steady, which cost her everything she had. "I'm okay," he said. "I'm in a car. I don't know where." A pause, and she heard in the pause the effort of a child managing fear with the limited tools available to him. "There's a man driving. He won't tell me where we're going." Another pause. "He took my backpack, but not my watch. My watch has a—" The line cut. She looked at the phone in her hand. Matteo was looking at her. "His watch," she said. "Does Nico have a tracking function on his watch?" Matteo looked at her for 1 second. Then he reached into the pocket of his jacket and pulled out his own watch. Identical, she saw, identical to whatever Nico had been describing, and held it up. "Dad set them up," he said. "We can see each other's location." She took the watch from his hands. The screen was small, and the interface was a child's interface, but the GPS function was active, and the dot labeled Nico was moving northeast on a route that ran parallel to the lake, 14 miles from where she was sitting in a stone passage with his sister in her lap and his brother's watch in her hands. She called Dante. He answered on the first ring. "I have his location," she said. The dot on the watch screen moved northeast and then stopped. Evelyn read the cross streets to Dante and heard him relay them to someone in the background. A clipped exchange, 2 voices, the sound of a car moving fast. She held the watch with both hands in the stone passage with Leon standing near the pantry door and Livia pressed against her side and Matteo sitting very still with his eyes on the watch screen, like he could will the dot to stay fixed by looking at it hard enough. The dot stayed fixed for 4 minutes. Then it moved again, slightly, and stopped. "He's inside a building," Matteo said. He said it with the flat precision of someone reporting data, which was how he managed the things he could not afford to feel yet. "That's what it looks like," Evelyn said. "The dot moves when he moves," Matteo said. "Inside the building." "Okay," she said. "That means he's moving around. That means he's okay." Matteo looked at the watch and said nothing. Dante called back in 6 minutes. His voice was compressed, not controlled the way it usually was, but compressed. The difference between a door held shut by will and a door held shut by a hand braced against it. "We have the location," he said. "It's a property connected to a holding company that runs through 2 of Luca's shell entities. We're 12 minutes out." A pause. "Stay in the passage. Do not come out regardless of what you hear." Dante. "Regardless," he said. "I need to know you and the other 2 are in that passage." She looked at Livia's face against her shoulder. She looked at Matteo. "We're here," she said. 12 minutes, he said, and the call ended. She put the phone in her pocket and kept the watch in her hands, and the 3 of them sat in the stone passage in the specific suspension of people waiting for something they cannot affect to resolve itself. Livia breathed against her shoulder with the shallow, careful rhythm of a child trying not to cry. Matteo stared at the dot on the watch screen. Evelyn held both of them, one with her arm and one with her presence, and breathed slowly and deliberately and let the time pass. At the 8-minute mark, the dot moved sharply. A significant jump, the kind that meant not a person pacing, but a person being moved. And then it stopped, and then it moved again, and then it was still. Matteo made a sound, small and involuntary, immediately swallowed. "He's still moving," Evelyn said. "Moving is good. Moving is him." Matteo pressed his lips together and nodded once. At minute 14, Dante called. "We have him," he said. The 3 words landed in the passage like something physical. Evelyn felt Livia go rigid against her shoulder and then completely loose, all the held tension releasing at once in the specific way that bodies release things they have been gripping too long. Matteo put his face down on his knees, and she heard one sharp exhaled breath, and then nothing, which was its own kind of sound. "Is he hurt?" she said. No. A pause. Scared. He is scared and angry, which means he is fine. Something in Dante's voice had changed, still compressed, but differently now. The compression of a person containing something that is too large and too close to the surface for the current circumstances. He's asking for Evelyn. She closed her eyes for 1 second. Tell him I'm with his brother and sister and we're all fine, she said. Tell him his watch worked. A muffled exchange. Then Dante again. He says he knows. He says he planned it that way. She laughed. It came out raw and a little broken, and she did not try to manage it. They came out of the passage when Leon got the all clear from Marco. The house was the same house it had always been. Same floors, same light, same old smell of wood, and the faint pencil-shaving memory of Matteo working in the library. But it felt different in the way that spaces feel different after something has almost happened in them. Livia went immediately to the kitchen and sat at the counter and asked for something to eat, which was either shock or hunger, or the specific resilience of a child whose body knew that the crisis had passed before her mind had fully processed it. Evelyn made her toast and eggs without comment, and put the plate in front of her, and Livia ate 7 bites, and then 3 more, and did not mark her paper because she had left it upstairs. And also, Evelyn suspected, because she had forgotten about it. Matteo went to the library. She heard him on the stairs and then heard, after a few minutes, the thin, careful sound of the music box, playing again. He had wound it up. Nico came through the front door 40 minutes later with Marco behind him and Dante behind Marco, and he was wearing his coat still, and his face had the specific wrecked quality of a child who has been holding himself together for an hour and a half and is now in the presence of people for whom he does not have to hold it anymore. He looked at Evelyn across the hall, and his face did the thing it had been not doing for 90 minutes. She crossed the hall, and he came forward, and she put her arms around him, and he grabbed the back of her sweater with both fists and did not make a sound, which was somehow the most sound she had ever heard from him. She held him until his grip loosened. "You okay?" she said, against the top of his head. "Yeah," he said. His voice was wrecked and small. "I planned the whole thing with the watch. I thought about it the whole time. I wasn't scared." "I know," she said. "I was a little scared," he said. "I know," she said. He pulled back and scrubbed his face with the back of his hand and reassembled the version of himself that he preferred people to see, which was slightly less convincing than usual and therefore more real. "Is Livia crying?" he said. "She's eating eggs," Evelyn said. He considered this. "That's better," he said, and went to the kitchen. Dante stood in the hall. She looked at him. He had a cut on the back of his left hand she had not noticed before. Shallow, dried, the kind of thing that happens in a physical confrontation when other things are more pressing than the hand. His coat had a mark on the shoulder that she did not examine closely. He was looking at her with an expression that had stopped trying to be anything other than what it was. "Luca," she said. "In custody," he said. "Federal agents were waiting when we arrived. Hirsch had been on the phone with the contact since 6 this morning." He paused. "The property we went to is registered to an entity that appears in the same documentation chain as the phone records. They had grounds to move." Sebastian's statement was what they needed to establish the chain formally, he said. "Yes." She leaned against the wall. The exhaustion she had been running ahead of for the last 7 hours caught her now in a single wave that started in her knees and moved upward. "Sit down," he said. "I'm fine. You've been standing in a stone passage for 50 minutes, and before that, you drove across the city in the middle of the night and went to see your ex-husband alone," he said. "Sit down." She sat down on the bottom step of the staircase. He sat beside her, which was not something she had expected, and the two of them sat on the stairs in the quiet house, while from the kitchen came the sound of Nico's voice beginning a terrible knock-knock joke, and Livia's voice groaning in advance of the punchline. "The hearing," she said. "The continuation date." "Hirsch believes the petition will be withdrawn given Luca's arrest," he said. "It was his petition, filed through his network. Without him pushing it, there's no standing." "Good," she said. "The federal investigation will take time," he said. "Sebastian will cooperate, but the process of cooperating is slow, and there will be motions and counter-motions, and attorneys doing what attorneys do. It will not be resolved quickly." I know, she said. And my name will be in the coverage, he said. This family's name. What we are and what I have done and what I have been will be examined in ways that will be uncomfortable in public. I know that too, she said. He looked at his hands, the cut on the back of the left one. I understand if that changes your calculation. She looked at his profile, the severity of the face she had catalogued on the first night, and then learned over 9 days to read differently. The exhaustion underneath the control, the specific weight of a man who had been carrying a loss and a fury and a responsibility larger than any one person should carry alone. My calculation, she said, is that there are 3 children in this house who needed someone to stay, and I stayed. That's the calculation I made. The rest of it is circumstances. He turned to look at her. The contract, she said. The contract, he said. I want to sign it, she said. I want to sign it properly. Not as an emergency measure and not as a strategic structure. I want to sign it because I'm choosing to. She held his gaze. But I want you to understand what you're agreeing to. I'm not going to be managed. I'm not going to be given partial information and strategic access. If I am in this family, I am in it. The good version and the complicated version. I know what I'm agreeing to, he said. Do you? Yes, he said. Something moved through his voice. Not softness exactly, but the specific quality of a thing that has stopped protecting itself. I have known since you put yourself between my children and that staircase. She looked at him for a moment. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. From the kitchen, Nico's knock-knock joke reached its punchline and Livia laughed. A real laugh, unguarded, the laugh of a child who has forgotten for a moment that the world is difficult. And the sound of it moved through the house like something finding the right space for the first time. Above them, the music box played on. The weeks that followed were not simple. Evelyn had not expected them to be. The federal investigation moved with the grinding institutional pace of large legal processes. Sebastian Crane's cooperation was real, but lawyered. Every piece of information he provided came wrapped in protective language and conditional framing, the way a man gives you something while keeping his hand on it. It was enough. Enough to confirm the shell entity, enough to name the intermediaries, enough to establish a chain that ran from a prepaid phone in a storage locker through a Delaware entity, through Crane Medical's external portfolio, to a man named Faro, who was extradited from Portugal 4 months after Nico came home. Luca Ferretti did not cooperate. He went to arraignment with a team of attorneys and a posture of profound and elaborately maintained innocence that everyone in the courtroom recognized as theater. His lead attorney was excellent. The process would be long. Hirsch had told Dante plainly in their first meeting after the arrest that a conviction for Sophia's death would require more than the phone records. It would require Faro's testimony, or a second witness they did not yet have. That witness came 6 weeks later. A man who had worked as Luca's driver for 11 years, who had been present in the storage locker when the phone was purchased, and who had apparently been carrying what he knew like a stone in his chest for 14 months and was tired of the weight of it. He called Hirsch's office on a Tuesday morning and asked what cooperation looked like in exchange for protection. It looked, Hirsch told him, like this. Dante told Evelyn about it the same evening at the kitchen table after the children were in bed. He told her plainly and completely, which was the version of himself she had asked for and which he had been learning in increments to provide. She listened and asked the questions she needed to ask, and he answered them, and when it was done, they sat at the kitchen table in the house that had slowly, in the accumulation of ordinary evenings, become something different from what it had been when she arrived. It'll go to trial, he said. Yes, she said. It will take time. I know. He looked at her across the table. Sophia deserved faster. She did not reach for a comfort that would not have been real. Yes, she said. She did. But she deserves accurate more than she deserves fast. So does the person Luca used to make that call. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, The children are going to have questions eventually, when they're older and they understand more of what happened. Yes, she said. I don't know how to answer all of them yet. You don't have to know yet, she said. You just have to be there when they ask them. He He looked at her with the expression that had stopped trying to be anything other than what it was, which was, she had come to understand, as close as this particular man came to wearing his whole self in the open. "I can do that," he said. Livia finished her score sheet on a Thursday morning in early spring. She had been carrying it around for days with the quiet awareness of someone approaching a significant event. And on Thursday, she sat at the kitchen counter with her breakfast and her pencil and made the final mark in the final box with a deliberateness that had the character of a ceremony. Then she slid the piece of paper across the counter to Evelyn. 20 marks, every box filled. "That's it," Livia said. "You passed." Evelyn looked at the paper, at the small, careful marks in their small, careful boxes, evidence of a child who had decided that trust was a thing you measured before you gave it, and had measured it, and had arrived at a conclusion. "Thank you," Evelyn said. "You can stay," Livia said, "officially." "I know," Evelyn said. Livia considered the paper for a moment. Then, with the offhandedness that children deploy when they are doing something that means a great deal to them, she said, "You could throw it away now if you want. I don't need it anymore." Evelyn looked at the paper, at the weeks it represented, and the mornings, and the six-bite dinners, and the knock-knock jokes, and the library with its broken things being methodically repaired, and this kitchen, and this child sitting across the counter from her with breakfast going cold while she waited to see what would happen. "I'm going to keep it," Evelyn said. Livia looked at her, then she picked up her fork. "Okay," she said. "That's fine too." The contract was signed on a Saturday afternoon with Hirsch present as a witness, and the children in the other room arguing about something that periodically escalated to a volume that caused Hirsch to glance at the door. It was not a ceremony. It was paperwork, which was what it needed to be. A document with specific terms, carefully considered, that said what it meant and meant what it said. Evelyn's finances remained entirely her own. She retained full professional standing independent of the Belandi name. Either party could dissolve the arrangement with appropriate notice and predetermined terms. Dante had drafted the terms himself, line by line, with the same precision he brought to everything. She had read them once and signed. Hirsch gathered the documents and left, and the children came into the study immediately after with the instinct children have for the end of adult proceedings. Nico asked if anything interesting had happened, and Dante told him no, paperwork, and Nico assessed this information and determined it did not warrant further investigation and left to find something more interesting. Livia sat on the arm of the chair near the window and swung her feet and did not ask anything, which meant she already understood and had decided the understanding was enough. Matteo stood in the doorway. He had been doing this less recently, standing in doorways watching rather than entering rooms. But old habits do not dissolve all at once. They thin gradually, like worn cloth becoming gradually more transparent until one day it gives way and you realize it has been gone for a while and you simply failed to notice the specific moment. He looked at Evelyn. He looked at the desk where the paperwork had been. "Is it done?" he said. "Yes," she said. He nodded once. He started to turn away and then stopped. "The music box," he said. "The mechanism was cracked on the inside. I had to recut the pin housing. I didn't have the right tools, so I improvised." He said it matter-of-factly, the way he said everything, but she had learned to hear the thing underneath the matter-of-fact, the way you learn to hear a frequency you had not known was there. "It doesn't sound exactly the way it used to. The pitch is a little different." "I know," she said. "I've been listening to it. It bothered me for a while," he said, "that it doesn't sound the same." "And now?" she said. He considered this with the seriousness he brought to questions that deserved it. "Now I think it sounds like itself," he said, "like what it actually is. Not like what it was before." He went upstairs. Evelyn stood in the study with Dante beside her and the afternoon light coming through the window at the angle it came through at this time of day. And she held that sentence for a moment the way you hold something small and dense to feel its weight. The months that followed wrote themselves in the specific quiet way that good periods of life tend to do, not in dramatic scenes but in accumulated ordinary mornings, in the particular smell of coffee in a kitchen where children argued and laughed and tracked mud and lost things and found them again. Livia began sleeping through the night. Nico's humor, which had always been armor, became something else. Still funny, still quick, but less defended. The difference between a joke told to manage a room and a joke told because something is genuinely funny. Matteo fixed 17 objects and left them on various surfaces throughout the house, in a distribution pattern that Evelyn eventually recognized as deliberate. Repaired things placed where people would find them and use them. The trial of Luca Ferretti began 11 months after his arrest and ran for 6 weeks. Evelyn was called to testify once about what she had witnessed in the house and in the courthouse. She sat in the witness box and answered questions with the plainness she had learned to bring to difficult things, neither more nor less than what was asked. And when it was done, she walked out of the building into a gray November afternoon and stood on the courthouse steps. Different courthouse, different steps, and felt the specific completeness of something coming to its end. Luca was convicted on 2 counts. The sentencing hearing was scheduled for February. Sebastian Crane's cooperation had been, as Hirsch predicted, sufficient to establish his role as a knowingly complicit party rather than an architect. His attorney negotiated a civil settlement with the state through Crane Medical and a personal fine of a scale that was meaningful without being ruinous. The Crane name survived, as Evelyn had told him it would. It was diminished. It was survivable. She heard through a mutual contact that Sebastian had left Chicago for a position in New York, quietly, without announcement. She did not feel the things she might have expected to feel about that. What she felt mostly was the absence of feeling, which was not emptiness but relief, the specific relief of a thing that has stopped taking up space. The foundation came later. It had been Dante's suggestion, originally, but it had been her project from the moment she began working on it. A genuine project, not a symbolic one, built from the ground up with the involvement of a social worker she had known from her family education center years, and a child psychologist who had worked with the Belandi children, and who had her own specific knowledge of what children who feel abandoned needed and did not receive. The Belandi Children's Art and Safety Foundation launched in the spring, with a storefront in Pilsen and a waiting list within the first month. She went there 3 days a week. She came home with paint on her hands and the specific tiredness of someone who has spent hours in the presence of children who are learning to trust again, which is the most exhausting and most necessary work she had ever done. One evening in late spring, she came home to find the kitchen empty and the house quiet in an unusual way. Not the quiet of absence, but the quiet of everyone being somewhere specific and occupied. She found Dante in the library, sitting at the work table with something she did not immediately recognize. A box of old photographs. He was looking at one. She came in and sat across from him. He turned the photograph so she could see it. Sofia Belandi, younger than Evelyn had imagined, laughing at something off-frame, with Matteo and Livia and Nico around her in the contracted heap that triplets sometimes make when they are very young and have not yet learned that they are separate people. Evelyn looked at the photograph. "I put these away," Dante said. "After. I thought seeing them would make things harder for the children. But Livia asked for them last week," he said. "She said she was forgetting what her mother's laugh looked like." He stopped. She said she remembered the sound, but she was forgetting the face that made it. Evelyn looked at the photograph, at Sophia's laughing face, caught mid-moment, entirely unaware of being permanent. "She should have them," she said. "I know," he said. "All 3 of them should have them," she said. "In their rooms, wherever they want them." He nodded. He looked at the photograph for another moment, and then he put it carefully back in the box with the others. He did not do it quickly. He took his time with it. That night at dinner, the photographs were on the table. Not displayed, but just present, in a stack that Livia had organized by some criteria known only to herself. She showed Nico and Matteo each one with a running commentary that was part memory and part invention, and the boys listened and added their own versions of events, and Dante sat at the head of the table and watched his children hold their mother's face in their hands and did not look away from it. Evelyn sat beside Livia and passed dishes and poured drinks and said nothing. She did not need to say anything. Later, when the children were in bed and the kitchen was clean and the house had settled into its nighttime self, she found Dante in the garden. It was warm for the season, the specific warmth of a spring evening that arrives before you feel entitled to it, and he was standing near the low wall at the edge of the garden with his hands in his pockets looking at the city lights visible above the roofline. She stood beside him. For a while, neither of them said anything. "I want to do this properly," he said. She looked at him. "The contract was necessary," he said. "It was right for what it was. But it was not—" He stopped. Tried again. "I want to do this in a way that is chosen, not managed, not structured." He looked at her. "I want to ask you properly." She understood what he was saying. She looked at his face in the half-dark, the face she had first catalogued as severe and had since learned as something more complex and more specific. The exhaustion that lived behind the control, the particular weight of a man who had survived something enormous and was still learning, slowly, that survival was permitted to become something more. "You want to choose it," she said. "Yes," he said. "I want to choose it, and I want you to choose it. Not because it's useful, not because of what it provides or what it prevents or what it signals to anyone." He held her gaze. "Because it's true." She thought about the first night, the courthouse steps and the rain and $26 and the word protection in the fourth line of a job posting. She thought about the stone passage and the music box and a little girl who had made a score sheet out of a piece of paper and a system out of grief and had arrived, after 20 marks, at a conclusion. She thought about the photograph on the table at dinner, Sophia's laughing face, the boys holding it, Livia's careful commentary. You did not replace what had been lost. You did not fill the shape of an absence. You became something new and adjacent to it, something that grew in the same soil without crowding it, something that belonged to the particular family that existed now, in this house, with these children, on this spring evening with the city lights above the roofline. "Yes," she said. He looked at her. "Yes," she said again. "I choose it." He exhaled slowly. Something in his posture changed, not a collapse, but the opposite, a settling, the specific release of a tension held for so long that its absence took a moment to identify. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. They stood in the garden in the warm spring dark, and the city made its sounds above them, and from somewhere inside the house came the faint, thin thread of the music box. Matteo must have wound it again before bed, or perhaps it was Livia, or perhaps it was Nico who had discovered that winding it was funnier than expected, and had been doing it in secret for weeks. The sound drifted out through the windows, a little imperfect, a little different from what it had been before, entirely itself. Evelyn Ward had walked out of one life with $26 and a worn bag, and the specific bruised disorientation of someone who has organized their existence around a structure that has just been demolished. She had walked through iron gates in the rain looking for the word protection and had found instead 3 children who needed someone to stay. She had stayed, not because she had nowhere else to go, not because the contract said she should, not because the man who ran the most powerful household in Chicago had structured an arrangement that made it logical. Because Livia had opened her door 3 inches on the second day and 6 inches on the third. Because Matteo had put a repaired music box in her hands. Because Nico had accepted a glass of juice across a kitchen counter and not said thank you, and that had been its own conversation. Because staying, when staying was hard, was the only thing that meant anything. The iron gates at the end of the drive were the same gates they had always been. Black iron, set in stone, giving no information about what was on the other side. But the lights of the house burned behind them now in the warm spring dark, visible above the garden wall, warm and particular and belonging to specific people living a specific life inside a structure that had stopped being a fortress. It was just a house now, the kind where someone always came to say goodnight, the kind where the music box played in the evenings, the kind where a little girl no longer woke up afraid.